Hey everybody, it's time to explain some survey result analysis, kind of what the results are telling me and what I think it means. So, um, the survey this week is about abortion, by the way, kind of sensitive. I'm going to caveat the whole thing by saying I'm a man, and that kind of makes it, I think that makes my point of view on this topic less important. Um, Um, whether you agree with that or not, that's what I think. So I'm not trying to make sweeping judgments on this, but I will interpret the data based on my point of view. So take it for what it's worth. All right. To get things kicked off, I'll explain Make Boise Better for anybody that isn't familiar with it. Make Boise Better is the easiest way to be a part of local solutions. So if you want to be engaged and you want to help make your community better, then this is the easiest way to do that. Instead of like going to a city council meeting at a certain time in a certain place, if you sign up on our email list right here, you'll get emails. You'll get 2 emails a week. An email on Monday where we invite you to our weekly survey, which is 10 questions, takes 2 or 3 minutes to respond to. And then on Thursday, you'll get the analysis of those survey results. The public results, they're out there for you to look at, and then also my take on them, which is what this video is about. Okay, so this week we're asking about abortion. It's a big topic, super sensitive. It's a national issue, but it's also something we're trying to grapple with locally. And getting a sense for what people in your community feel about it, I think is something I wanted to know, and I think probably some others want to know. So all of our survey resources are publicly available. So you can see our questions here if you want to see how anything was worded. If you want to see the overall results, you can click this link and actually see how things broke down. And then the analysis post is linked to here, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's dive in. First of all, analysis posts are all about kind of taking those overall results that everybody has access to and slicing them or drilling in with to find patterns across how different groups of people answered things. So we can mash up different questions to see where the interesting patterns are. And we did find some interesting patterns. So let's start off first with the demographics of our sample. So these are the types of people that answered this survey. So we're pretty even on men and women, so that's good. By the way, all these question marks are people that we're not sure how they fall on this demographic because they didn't take the survey where we asked that. So that's just so those these could all be women, these could all be men, these could all be gender nonconforming. We don't know. All right, political affiliation. We heard from more liberals than conservatives. We've got a fair group of unaffiliated people. And then we look at age, we're more on the younger end of the spectrum, though we kind of cover it. And by the way, if I'm doing everything I can to get underrepresented groups like conservatives and older folks to join our list and participate. So if you have any ideas for that, feel free to drop me a line at cam@makeboisebetter.com. Anyway, given this breakdown, it's fair to assume that the overall results will trend more towards, I would expect more pro-choice answers. But that's okay because we can break them apart and see what the different groups are saying still. Okay. This question really ended up in my analysis becoming a really interesting one. This is what I ended up segmenting a lot of the answers by is, can abortions ever be justified? And the point of this question was really to see, do you think about this in like a pragmatic way? Like, real life situations might make it, I can't be like, maybe I hate this, but there's got to be some times where it makes sense. I'm not aware, um, like a pragmatic view versus the other side where it's like, no, never, never, ever, ever. It's never okay. More of like a principled, philosophical, extreme view. So most of them were in this, yes, sometimes it could be group. And we had a small but not insignificant, or I don't want to use that statistical term, but we had a fair amount of people in the never justified group. So that was interesting. So I was kind of curious who those people were. So I checked a bunch of things. The two closest ways I could get at splitting those answers apart to see what those did the best job of discriminating, or it's another stats term, of pulling those answers apart would be the best. So it appeared to be that your political affiliation could be the explainer, or that you've had kids as an explainer. So let's look at political affiliation first. So you can see that most of the Democrats are saying, yes, it can be justified sometimes. But we did have some people on the no. If you looked at Republicans, it was kind of closer to 50-50. Actually, more people said, yes, it could be justified sometimes, which was a little surprising to me. I thought we'd have more people in the no. So, yeah, and then in a group that we don't know their political affiliation, they look kind of like they're in between the Democrats and Republicans, which is kind of what I would think. But it's because it's probably mostly mixed with that. The neithers were all in the yes, it can be justified sometimes. Okay. So maybe it's politics. There's a group here that said no, that we're not sure about that, so I can't really verify it. But what about whether or not you've had children? This was interesting because almost all of the no's, it's never justified, have had children. So I'm not sure if this is the reason, or this is the causal factor. Maybe it's politics, and then it just so happens that most of the conservative people have children. I'm not really sure. But if I was going to make a theory about this one, I'd say that maybe if you've had kids, you have stronger emotions and philosophies on this issue. And maybe it's less theoretical. Maybe it is more theoretical for people that haven't had kids. But I would counter that my own argument with, you could have a lot of real world experiential points of view on this without having kids. Maybe you've dealt with an unwanted pregnancy yourself and been faced with abortion and gone through with it. So I don't think having kids means you're experienced, and not having kids means you're not experienced. So I guess that's not super clear. All right. So we know if you think it's ever justified or not, but let's try to get more specific. What do you think about specific circumstances? Now, if you put it's never justified, then you're probably in this group. It's never justified. So you probably didn't vote for any of these. And then there's also an option, it could always be justified. So people pick that quite a bit, and they might not have done all these. But when it comes down to the reasons that seem to be the best justifications for it, the top one was definitely a risk to the woman's health. Next one was rape, and then the third one was problems with the fetus. There are quite a few other votes here. And from my interpretation of the others, I would put a bunch of them into the risk to the women's health group. So that to me stands out as the top reason. Okay. So it's pretty tricky to segment, and I didn't find any super insightful angles on it. So we're not gonna do it on this one. We're gonna skip it. Okay, let's talk about prevention. Nobody likes abortion. If you have any doubts about that, that's what we got from a lot of comments, and I don't believe that anybody likes it. It's a really unfortunate situation that most people would not have to approach in the first place. Um, People consider abortions when they have unwanted pregnancies, or they have a wanted pregnancy, but there's an issue that arises. But ideally, you wouldn't have that issue. Anyway, maybe one of the best ways to prevent abortion, I want to know what's one of the best ways to prevent abortion. So asked about things like, is it abstinence? Is it stricter laws? Is it birth control, sex education, supportive services, information about adoption, etc.? The two biggest ones here that were voted for were birth control and sex education. Okay, so preventing pregnancies, unwanted pregnancies, then you're not faced with an abortion. It's trickier if you, I guess, I haven't spent as much time thinking about if you did want that pregnancy and there's an issue with it, though there were some really interesting comments about that below. So anyway, that's kind of where the overall landed. But I wanted to see how that never justified group answered it, to see if there were any patterns there. So of the people that said it can sometimes be justified, they kind of answered this birth control and sex education primarily, though there were a bunch of others. Complicated topic. A lot of people didn't want to choose one, choose the top. But all these people that said it was never justified, their answers are across the board. They're not on the same page. This further kind of reinforces that it's a tricky subject. There's not a consensus by any means, and even I thought maybe there would be more consensus across people that are like, this isn't ever justified, but there's not. At least not in our group. If we had heard from more people, maybe something would shake out. Okay. Now, then I was interested in asking about, okay, let's say that prevention doesn't work, and you are have a pregnancy, and there's issues, and you're considering ending it. At what point is it not okay anymore? If assuming that, even if you think abortion's never okay, then I would expect you to be in this at conception, can't end it. So where can you not end it? Is it at conception, like that second? Is it the next morning? Is it, when the fetus has a heartbeat, it can feel pain, it could survive on its own during delivery. Hey Wookie. Playtime? Sorry, buddy, I'm busy. So the people voted most for when the fetus could survive on its own. Okay, so it's viable, but that was only 30%. So we're really spread out. And there were, are you persistent? One throw. Give me that. Okay, that's his only throw. I'm distracted. Anyway, there's a lot of others. This is complicated, and a lot of people said in the others, it can always be justified. And okay, you have to go out. Dang it, you saw my shorts. I'm not all dressed for the day yet. Oh well. Okay, getting back on track. A lot of the others said it can always, there's no limit to when it can be ended. It totally depends on what's going on with the woman. It's the woman's choice. So I should have had that in there as an option. My bad. Okay, let's look at those never justified people again. I thought they would all be in this at conception group. Okay, abortion is never justified. So once the egg and the sperm are together, like it's a done deal. You gotta have that kid. Um, but that wasn't true. That was only about half of them. Some of them said when there's a heartbeat. One of them said when the fetus can feel pain, and somebody was in the other. So that was interesting to me because I was thinking maybe here's my theory. Um, if you said it's never justified, but then you said like it's essentially okay to end it at conception, um, maybe I worded that question weirdly and they're saying like before conception, but assume that they read it as, their conception has happened. It's okay to end it recently after that. So maybe what they were saying is never justified as like a later stage pregnancy, or maybe it's more fine tuned than that. It's like, okay, the next morning you can end it, but a week later, maybe not, a month later, maybe not, even before these other stages. I don't know. But that's kind of one line of reasoning I have. Okay, let's talk about laws. Should they be more or less restrictive? Most people said they should be less restrictive overall. Let's break it down by the justification people again. The never justified people, I kind of thought they'd all be in the much more restrictive camp. But that it makes sense that maybe they're not because hardly anybody voted to make that using laws to prevent abortion was the best way. So they're all in the on the either no change or more restrictive side, but they're not all super intense about it in the much more restrictive. So that's interesting. Okay, now that we've talked about laws, what do you think about voting? Essentially, how does it rank in your issues? Is it your number one issue? Is it in your top 5? Is it not in your top 10? So we're kind of across the board, and the middle answer appears to be in your top 5 issues. So I'd say important, but not the most important. And again, I wanted to look at, and one thing I called out here is I bet people would think it's more important if they really believed that the Roe versus Wade precedent could be overturned. I bet then you'd see a bunch of people saying it's in my top 2 issues, maybe my top 1 issue at that point. But I'm guessing a lot of people are like, well, I don't know if this is really going to get overturned. So it's important to me, but like I think this is kind of settled. And some of the comments kind of indicated that. Okay, what about those never justified people? They're spread over the course of the whole thing. Just like the people that said, yes, it can be justified. We've got a very, very passionate person about it. And we've got people that aren't passionate about it. And we've got, people in the kind of middle ground. So they're not all super gung-ho. Okay, well, that's it for charts. I would encourage everybody to look at the comments. There's some really good ones in here. The influence of religion was interesting. How people talked about the woman's choice and what men think, and how important that is or not. Adoption. People are talking about how adoption system doesn't work very well. Unwanted pregnancies being the challenge. Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. It's tricky. So that's all for now. Check it out. And hopefully, this helps and you learned something. Have a good day.